Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my long overdue full review of the Hifiman He6Se version 2. And I just wanted to say thank you to Hifiman for being so patient with me, and sorry it took so long to get this out, but several months ago I got buried in equipment, got behind on my reviews, and trying to get caught up. So anyway, this is the He6Se version 2 from Hifiman. It was loaned to me for review by Hifiman a long time ago. And this headphone currently, well, it's kind of complicated. I was going to say it currently sells for $699, but that's not absolutely true, because the fact is this is the version 2, and as far as I can figure out, Hifiman is no longer selling the version 2. And in fact, I think the version 2 was sold through other retailers other than Hifiman, but Hifiman does still have the original He6Se, not the original He6, which came out way back in 2011, I believe, but the He6Se. And the original version, I think, went about $1,200, and I almost bought one of those back in 2012. But I was just getting into high-end headphones or audiophile grade headphones, and I ended up buying the HE500 instead, and which was probably the right decision at that time, because I had an amp that put out about 1.25 watts. It was a combination amp DAC. It was the Benchmark DAC 1, which is a really great amp DAC, but I don't think it would have had enough power to push the He6 to its full potential. So I ended up buying the HE500, which was a great headphone and my primary headphone for the next 5 years, and it was about half the price of the He6. But anyway, Hifiman came out with the He6Se, which looks a lot like this. And one of the big differences from the original, if some of you will remember back to the original, and my HE500 was the same way, that the cable was removable, but it connected with little screw-on connectors that were a huge pain to screw on and off, and no one else sold a cable that was compatible. So anyway, when Hifiman revived the He6 and came out with the SE, they, like this one, they put the 3.5 millimeter connectors on it, which is a huge improvement. And you can use cables from, almost anywhere. That's a very common connection now. So anyway, the original version 2 of the He6Se, I believe, sold for $17.99. And the last I knew, it was down to $6.99. Right now, I did look at Hifiman's website, and they do have a refurbished version of this, the V2, for only $369, and I don't know why someone hasn't grabbed that up, because that is an incredible deal. But when I did my first impressions video of this headphone, I looked, and you can still get this on Amazon for $6.99, but I don't see it there right now, although there are several of these on eBay, but I didn't get around to looking at each listing and finding out if any of those were new, still new in the box, or if these were used units, and I don't recall the prices. They were kind of all over the place. So anyway, but you can still get the He6Se, which, as far as I know, uses the same drivers, same ear cups, all that. The only difference I know of is the headband. And this uses the headband that actually some of the lower priced headphones from Hifiman use, like the 400 SE and some headphones like that. And the original He6Se uses a headband like on the Nano, or on the, the Ananda headphones. It's like this. This is the Hifiman Ananda Nano. And this is the style of headphone band that the He6Se uses, and I actually prefer this. I like it better. It's not as nice as what's on the Arias, because the Arias have a swivel point here, and these just move a little bit instead of swiveling. But I actually find this type of band more comfortable than what is on this, the version 2. So as far as I know, it should sound the same, but I can't guarantee that because I have not heard the He6Se, only the version 2, which I have here. And also the version 2 is in a beautiful dark blue, where the original He6 was in a gloss black, and I think the He6Se was in more, I think, a flat black or maybe a flat dark gray, something like that. So anyway, but you can get the He6Se, or you might have to look around to find the version 2. So that said, and I'm sorry I went on so long about that, this is a wired full-size over-the-ear open back headphone. It uses planar magnetic drivers. It has an impedance of 50 ohms and a sensitivity of 83.5 decibels. And if you do the math on that, you're going to realize this headphone is very hard to drive. This is one of the most power-hungry headphones that I have ever reviewed, and it is known pretty much by the headphone world as being one of the hardest to drive headphones. Hang on just a second. Okay, I was making sure my camera was level there. It looked like it was tipped a little bit. Anyway, I don't want to end up with a video that's tipping to one side. So these are very power hungry, and they will not reach their full potential when underpowered. When underpowered, they sound thin and lack bass and lack dynamics. So my recommendation, and I'm going to point this out right from the beginning, I recommend an amp that is capable of a clean output of at least 3 watts per channel into 32 ohms. I think Hi-Fi Man recommends 2 watts per channel at least, and that's probably sufficient, but I'm going to go a little further and say 3 watts per channel to make sure you have enough power behind this, because when it is powered properly, it's a completely different headphone. It becomes super dynamic and has really not heavy bass, but really punchy bass, and just is just a way better headphone. Than if it's underpowered, it might be loud enough, but it's going to lack dynamics and any weight to the bass. Anyway, according to the website, this headphone weighs in at 470 grams. That's Hi-Fi Man's website. This headphone is still on there. According to the box, it's 510 grams. According to my kitchen scale, it's 511 grams, real close to what the box says. So this is at 511 grams. It's a heavy headphone. There is no doubt about it. No one's going to argue that this is not a heavy headphone. It's not the heaviest I've ever reviewed. I think the Kennerton Odin was heavier than this, and I'm almost positive the Urzatish Phobos was heavier than this. I think that was up around 600 grams. But this is a heavy headphone. Weight has never bothered me as far as headphones. Heavy headphones have not been an issue to me. Some people do not like heavy headphones. Some people say they hurt their neck, whatever, you know. I actually find this headphone comfortable, and the weight doesn't bother me. I started out, my first serious headphone was a Hi-Fi Man He6, which uses, or not the He6, the He500, which uses the same magnets as this, the same ear cups, so I think it's the same weight, and I got used to that. And so now heavy headphones really don't bother me. Okay, this headphone has I mentioned it already, a detachable cable, and it has 3.5 millimeter connectors. So the cable that comes with this is different than any cable I've seen with any other Hi-Fi Man headphones. It comes with a headphone that obviously has 3.5 millimeter connectors, but the other end has a full-size 4-pin XLR, which I think is great, but not everyone has a headphone amp with 4-pin XLR. So it comes with this adapter, and that's the unusual part. I've only seen one other headphone that I've ever reviewed that came with an adapter to go from 6.3 millimeter single-ended to 4-pin XLR, and that was a Kennerton Ragnar, a much more expensive headphone. But anyway, this does come with an adapter. So if you don't have an amp with 4-pin XLR, you plug this in. If I can get it. There we go. It's snapped together. Now you can use your 6.3 jack. And you can do this. You can go from your single-ended output into a balanced cable hooked up to your headphone. That will not hurt anything. You can't do the opposite. You can't plug a non-balanced cable into a 4-pin XLR or a 4.4 millimeter balanced output, because you could damage your amp, because a non-balanced cable is going to combine the grounds, and a balanced amp keeps the grounds separate. So anyway, I did want to point out though that this cable has some sort of almost clear plastic tubing on it, and I do not like that at all. I don't know if the He6Se uses the same thing, but it's just ridiculous. It kinks. It's not very flexible, and you can see here how it's kinked. I mean, this cable sounds fine. Sound-wise, it's fine. I have no issues. But this cable covering is the worst I have ever seen on any cable from any manufacturer. I do not like it at all. And it's even the rubber, black rubber on like the Sundara cable is much nicer than this. And it's same things on the adapter. So that is the one thing that I will point out that I do not like about this headphone, is they could have put a much nicer cover on the cable than this clear plastic. It's almost like surgical tubing, but a lot more stiff. So anyway, let me roll in and or move in a little bit here and give you a closer look at the headphone. And like you can see it's a beautiful dark blue, glossy dark blue. I love the color. Your headband, like I said, it's kind of the style on, I think, doesn't the Edition XS use this same band? I can't remember. I haven't heard that one in a while. But anyway, you got click adjustments here that are nice. They stay adjusted. The headband does have some padding. It's comfortable, but I do prefer the style that's on the Ananda Nano that I showed you. The ear cups, they swivel a little bit this way, not a whole lot, but they swivel all you need that way. Has tapered ear pads, thicker in the back. They are a synthetic leather. They've got a cloth material on the inside, and they're full size, like 110 millimeters, I think. So there's plenty of room for your ears in there. It's not the egg-shaped ear cups of some of the other Hifiman headphones, but actually I prefer the round. Even the Susvara uses round. I actually have a little bit of an issue with the egg-shaped ear cuffs from Hifiman because they ride low on my jaw, and I do have some issues with TMJ in the right side of my jaw, and they do irritate it after a while, where the round ear cups don't. So I actually prefer the round. But did point that out. It's got the 6.3 millimeter connectors, and it does have the old style grills that Hifiman's been using ever since the original He6 and the original He5 and all those headphones from like 10, 12 years ago. Okay, before I get into the sound of this headphone, I want to mention the equipment I was using, and I've used as a source my desktop computer running Windows 10 using Windows Media Player, playing CDs that were ripped to my computer in WAV lossless format. And I also used, most of the time, I use CDs run through either an SMX SLPL200 CD player used as a transport only, or the Cambridge Audio 540C CD player also used as a transport only. And then the DACs I used primarily with this were the Topping D70 SMQA version, which happens to be my favorite Topping DAC. The Topping D70 Pro Saber version, which is a newer version of the D70. The Audio GD R8, which is an R2R DAC, a great R2R DAC. And the little less expensive Topping E50. And then as far as combination amp DACs that I used with this, I used the Hifiman EF400, the Hifiman EF600, the Hifiman Serenade, and the iFi Audio Neo IDSD2. And I do want to emphasize that that was the version 2 that has about 5 times the power of the version 1. The version 1 of the Neo will not have enough power to bring out the best of this headphone, but the version 2 that puts out 5.25 watts per channel, something close to that, does a very good job with this headphone. And then also the Burson Conductor 3 reference, which you probably can see right here next to me. And then as far as standalone amps, I use the Audio GD Master 9, the Hifiman Prelude, the Topping A70 Pro, the Emotiva A1 Bass X, which is a pretty impressive amp for what it does. One thing really well, puts out a ton of clean power. And I don't think you can see that. It's right here. You might be able to see it. It's right here behind me. Anyway, what that is a 50 watt per channel speaker amp that has a headphone output on it. Well, normally the headphone output on that only puts out like 180 milliwatts, something like that. But this amp comes with a set of jumpers that you can install, and when you do, it puts the full output, the full speaker output, into the headphone jack, which is 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms, or roughly 12.5 watts per channel into 32 ohms, and that will drive this thing like nothing. And it's actually one of my favorite amps to use with this, and the bad part is that amp was discontinued a few years ago, replaced with a similar amp, which I just recently found out that's been discontinued. So I don't know if Emotiva is going to put out another speaker amp with that capability where you can put in jumpers and put the speaker output into the headphone jack. But I actually love this headphone driven with the Emotiva, and I only paid $229 for that about 5 years ago. Okay, a couple other amps that I used with this are the Wells Audio V8, which is an OTL tube amp. And I know what you're thinking right now. No way, there's no way that an OTL tube amp will drive the He6Se, but this one does. And I think you can see it right here. It is from Wells Audio. It is an OTL tube amp that will drive not only the He6, but the Hifiman Susvara very well. I don't know why or how it does it. I didn't believe it when I heard it, but I have tried it, and this amp does a very good job of driving both the He6 and the Susvara. And the last amp I think that I used with this is the Waveborn Power Amp Plus, which is another tube amp that's sitting right here. The difference is this is a transformer coupled amp and is rated very conservatively at 3 watts per channel into 32 ohms, and it does a very good job of driving this headphone. So anyway, let's finally get into the description of the sound of this headphone. I would describe this headphone as almost dead neutral. And as a reference, a headphone I consider to be dead neutral would be the Hifiman Sundara. Not the Susvara, but the Sundara. Okay, this headphone has a real, I would call it very accurate. It doesn't have any big humps or dips. it doesn't have the bass emphasized. And Hi-Fi Man lately, headphones like the Ananda Nano, the Aria Organic are leaning a little bit more towards V-shaped with a little bit of emphasis in the bass. Where this headphone was originally, I think came out, like I said, the original version of this in 2011. This is more neutral. It does not have that emphasis to the bass. It has bass. It has good bass. It's there. It's just not emphasized. So I would consider the tone balance neutral. This is not a headphone for bass heads. If you're a bass head, you probably won't be happy with this headphone. You could boost the bass, but if you do that, because this headphone already requires a huge amount of power, if you try boosting the bass, only a 3 decibel boost is going to double your power requirement, and that could overwhelm your amp. And a 6 decibel bass, now you're at 4 times the power, and the problem is you push your amp into the point where it's clipping, where it's distorting. And I know that Hi-Fi Man has a reputation of driver failures, which I don't think is the fault of Hi-Fi Man personally. I think the reason that Hi-Fi Man drivers are failing is because most Hi-Fi Man headphones aren't real heavy in bass, and people are trying to boost the bass too heavily and causing their amp to go into distortion because it can't put out the power that it needs to boost the bass. If you try to boost the bass 12 decibels, you are now requiring 16 times the power out of your amp that you would if it was running flat. Okay, so you take a headphone that needs, like maybe a watt of power to really sound good. Now you boost the bass 12 decibels. Now you're looking at like 16 watts, and there's only a couple amps on the planet that can put out that kind of clean power without distorting. Okay, so if you do push your amp to the point it's clipping, basically what's happening is the sine wave, instead of being a nice smooth arc up and down like this, it becomes squared off at the top. You come up, it squares off because you ran out of headroom. Then you come down, you square off, and all the sine waves, instead of being the smooth arcs, are square. Okay, well, what happens when you square off that sound wave, instead of the diaphragm of the speaker moving in a nice smooth arc back and forth, it goes up, stops, goes down, stops, goes up, stops. And when that diaphragm isn't moving, it's not dissipating any heat, so it melts, it builds up heat, it melts the voice coils, destroys your drivers. Even though you didn't overpower the headphone, it's not operating properly with a squared off sine wave, building up heat, and you wreck your drivers. So that's personally why I think a lot of people have blown drivers on Hi-Fi Man headphones, is they're trying to boost the bass too hard, and they're causing their amp to clip and their headphone to overheat. The fastest way to blow speakers, home speakers, especially the tweeters, which are small and can't dissipate a lot of heat, is to run your amp into the stage where it's clipping, and you'll blow the tweeters in a second. And like I said, that's because they're small and can't dissipate the heat. And likewise, headphone speakers, the drivers are small and can't dissipate that heat. So I just wanted to point that out, that I think giving a Hi-Fi Man or any planar headphone more than 3 decibels of boost, I think, is a bad idea, and especially a power-hungry headphone like this. So if you need more bass, you're probably better off with a dynamic driver headphone, which handle bass boost better and are usually a lot easier to drive, so you're not pushing your amp into the point of clipping. So, sorry I went off, kind of segued there, off into a long story that might not be necessary, but it might help someone out there, so I thought I'd share it. Okay, frequency extension. This headphone has good frequency extension. It goes low and it goes high, but I would say the low end of this, it's there. It goes into the sub bass, but the sub bass is not emphasized. So it doesn't have a lot of weight to the sub bass. It's there, it's present, but it's, you know, like I said, it's neutral. It's basically showing you what's on the recording, but the sub bass is not emphasized, neither is the mid bass. So, like I said, this is not a headphone I'd recommend to bass heads. And once again, EQing a bunch of bass into this headphone, I don't think is a good idea. Okay, clarity and detail, that is where this headphone shines. This headphone has outstanding clarity and detail, especially for its price. The only headphones that I have heard that I think can compete with this as far as clarity and detail are the higher end Hifiman headphones. And I'm talking about not even the Arias. I don't think the Arias, not even the Aria Organic, competes with this headphone in detail. The detail of this, in my opinion, is up there on the level of the HE1000 Stealth and even the HE1000 SE. That is how much detail this headphone has. It is incredible. I'll give a brief comparison in a few minutes. It doesn't sound exactly the same, but as far as detail, especially the mid-range, this thing is up there with the best and even hold its own against the Hifiman Susvara at about 10 times the price of this. Okay, bass. The bass of this, once again, it's a neutral bass. It's not, doesn't have a huge amount of weight to it. It's not emphasized, but it is very tight. It is well controlled, and it's very punchy if this is amped properly. If you've got enough amp behind this headphone, the bass becomes very punchy, very dynamic. If you don't, the bass is going to be soft and kind of lacking. The mids, super clean, a little bit forward, kind of in your face. This is not a V-shaped frequency, it's straight. So the mids are going to be a little more prominent than some of the headphones like the Nano or the Organic. The bass or the mid-range is kind of in your face, but that's part of what makes the detail of this really jump out at you. This thing is extremely fast. I mean, the transitions from one note to another is up there with the HE1000s and up there with the Susvara. Just extremely fast reaction to the music. I will say, though, that the mid-range is slightly on the dry side, not on the dry side of neutral, but I would say slightly on the dry side compared to the Nano or the Organic. The Organic has a nice, warm, rich mid-range. This does not reach that point of warmth. It's, like I said, it's more neutral. So compared to the Organic or the Aria Stealth, it's more of a slightly drier mid-range. Treble. I would say the treble is a little more tame than, say, the Aria Organic. Some of the other Hifiman headphones are known to be quite bright. None of them bother me, but that's probably because of my age. I actually really like Hifiman treble. It's really clean and sparkly to me, so I don't like headphones that have rolled off treble. This doesn't roll off, but it's not quite as bright as like the Arias or the 1000s. Soundstage. Excuse me just a second. It's easy to get dried out when you talk for 30 minutes straight. So how far am I? Yeah, I'm like 29 minutes into this video. Okay, soundstage. This headphone does not have a huge soundstage. It's, I would say, actually just slightly smaller than the soundstage of the Aria Stealth, which had a smaller soundstage than the original Aria. The Aria Organic definitely has a wider soundstage. The 1000 Stealth, 1000 SE definitely have a wider soundstage. The Susvara has a wider soundstage. It's a little smaller, but not what I would consider compact. Excuse me. Decent depth of the soundstage, but not a huge amount. So, I mean, this isn't going to be spread out all over, but it does. I mean, you do hear instruments out here a ways. So, it does have a decent soundstage, but not huge. I have heard that by switching out the grills, you can get a larger soundstage by putting a more open grill on that. I did that with my HE500. I haven't got around to doing that on this, but I have been told that a more open ground or grill will give you a larger sound stage. Imaging. Excellent imaging, very pinpoint. You can hear exactly where each instrument's coming from. Separation. The separation between instruments and between instruments and voices, all that is outstanding on this headphone. Just absolute, complete separation, nothing blurs together. On cheaper headphones, you just pretty much hear everything from here and there, and everything's just kind of blurred together. Where you get into better headphones and the instruments move around up in front of you, some move up in height, some move down, but each one that comes from its own location, and they're separate from each other. They're not smeared together. This headphone does a very good job of separating instruments. Dynamics. I said it earlier, when properly powered, this headphone is extremely dynamic, extremely punchy. One of the most dynamic and punchy headphones that I've heard to this point, and I've reviewed something like 40 or 50 headphones now. It's more dynamic than the Arias, it's more dynamic than the 1000s, more than the 1000 SE, probably even more dynamic than the Susvara. This headphone is very punchy, but only when properly powered. If it's underpowered, then no, it's got a soft, the bass just doesn't have weight to it when it's underpowered, and you will not get that dynamic sound. But even mid-range, things like snare drums and things like that just jump out at you out of this headphone. Forgiveness. By that I mean, is this headphone forgiving of less than perfect recordings? And I would say not really. This headphone thrives on really good recordings. If there are flaws in a recording, this will bring them out. You will hear them. Comfort, once again, it's heavy. Not heavy to the point it bothers me. The clamping force is just about right. Not squeezing my head, but I don't feel like it's going to fall off. The ear pads are comfortable. I think they have memory foam in them, actually. And I really find it a pretty comfortable headphone, but if a 511 gram headphone is too heavy for you, you might want to avoid it for that reason. I did want to mention that I did try doing some pad rolling with this. I tried, I think, 3, 4, maybe 5 different Kennerton sheepskin leather ear pads on this. And even though they made a big difference on the Sandara and on the HE500, and they all use the same ear pads, and the Kennertons fit. You've got to take the ring off of this. Like the other headphones, it has a plastic ring. So you've got to either take this ear pad off, which you'll wreck this ear pad doing that, or you can buy another set of plastic rings from Hifiman for $10, which is what I would recommend. Then you can put the Kennerton or different headphone pads right on that and snap this on it without wrecking these. Anyway, so I tried several different, and it made small differences in the sound. It actually, the Kennerton ECL01 actually brought out a little bit more mid-range detail, made it even cleaner, but it kind of made the mid-range sound a little more analytical, so wasn't really crazy with any of them. Never really could get more bass out of it. I even tried a couple of leather ear pads from JM Audio, and they made small differences but not significant. I ended up just putting the stock ear pads back on it, which seemed to be the best overall balance. Okay, did want to give a few short comparisons. The Sundara from Hifiman, which is like half the price of this. This basically has the same tone balance, but this is better in every way, more detail, more dynamic, just a better headphone. This is like a much better version of the Sundara, but this also needs a lot more power. The Nano has more bass, and the Nano has a warmer mid-range, but this easily out-details the Nano. The Aria Stealth. The Aria Stealth has more weight to the bass. The Aria Stealth has a warmer mid-range, has a slightly larger soundstage, and also the Nano does have a larger soundstage. Okay, but even the Ananda Stealth and the Ananda, or not the Aria Stealth and the Aria Organic, neither one of those can keep up with in detail with this headphone. Okay, so you've got to go all the way up to the 1000 HE1000 Stealth to get the same level of detail. The 1000 Stealth, I feel, is a better headphone, and what's it selling for? I think it was $13.99. I think that's down to $11.50 or $11.29 or something like that now. The Stealth is easier to drive. I'm talking about the 1000 Stealth now. Easier to drive, has more bass, has a warmer mid-range. I would take the 1000 Stealth over this headphone. And similar level of detail, and more width and more depth to the soundstage. The 1000 SE, I would definitely take over this. Just a better overall headphone. Okay, the Susvara. This headphone, actually, of all the Hifiman headphones, I actually think sounds the most similar to the Susvara. The Susvara is basically neutral with a slight emphasis in the bass. The Susvara is extremely detailed. Okay, the Susvara beats this in quite a few ways, but this, in my opinion, will take you like maybe 70% of the way to the Susvara for like 1/10 the price. This actually holds its own in detail, especially in the mid-range with the Susvara. The Susvara is going to give you more bass extension into the low end. It's going to give you more weight to the mid-bass. The Susvara is going to give you just as much detail, but with a warmer, richer mid-range. And but this keeps up with the Susvara in detail, and this keeps up with the Susvara in speed as far as transitions from note to note. So if you dream of owning a Susvara, also this needs almost as much power as the Susvara. The Susvara does need slightly more than this. Okay, the Susvara also needs really high-end equipment hooked to it, a really, really good DAC, and a really good amp. This, you don't have to spend as much money on those, although you do need almost the power of the Susvara. So, in my opinion, if you are dreaming of a Susvara, but it's nowhere close to your budget, for 1/10 the budget, you can get a pretty good taste of what a Susvara tastes like, or what a Susvara sounds like for much less money. So, bottom line, this thing needs a lot of power. This thing is heavy. Some people are going to find it too heavy. It's not for bass heads. I don't recommend trying to give it a heavy bass boost. It's got a very neutral tone balance. But like I said, in my opinion, this is the closest sounding Hifiman headphone to the Susvara. It has a similar sound and reminds me of the Susvara when I listen to it. So do I recommend this? Yes, I definitely recommend this headphone. I love this headphone. I put a lot of time in on it, but you've got to accept the fact that it's kind of neutral. It's not a bass heavy headphone, but outstanding detail and clarity up there, almost on the level of the Susvara. Highly recommend this headphone. I'm going to wrap this video up. It's gotten very long. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And please join us at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. We're up to over 36,000 members. Once again, thanks for watching my video.